Hello, everyone. It's Stephanie and Judy with Sonlight. Today, we are here to talk about historical field trips. Specifically, we're going to talk about Williamsburg, but we're going to also talk about other living history museums here in the States and maybe how you can find some if you're traveling abroad and the importance of them as well. Combining family vacations with a trip can be educational and fun, and it really does bring learning to life, which I'm sure we'll mention numerous times in this conversation. So first of all, we are going to talk about the Williamsburg guide that we have. You can find this at sonlight.com/Williamsburg, and it's a free download, and it's a travel guide, and it's super all include, like, just it has all kinds of information. It's a wealth of knowledge.
Yes.
So we're going to talk a little
bit. Pictures.
Yeah, with cool pictures. So some of the things that we were talking about when we thought about doing this was really, if you are doing D, for example, like Sonlight's History Bible Literature D, or All Subjects Package D, and you include a trip to Williamsburg, like that will just help bring all the things your child and yourself are reading about and learning to life.
Yes.
Judy, talk a little bit. I'm going to go through here and show a little bit, but I know that you were recently there. I haven't been there in many years. But what kind of things would you see at Williamsburg?
Well, I think, to me, just overall, the most exciting thing about Williamsburg and most other living history museums is that it really does make it come to life. So I remember when my kids first encountered people in period clothing and realizing you could almost see the wheels turning in their head as they thought, wow, this is just like being there. And so it's one thing to sit at your dining room table or the couch in your living room and read a story and use your imagination. But if your imagination has never encountered anything from a particular time period, you really don't have anything to base that creative imagining on. And so when you go to a place like Williamsburg, to walk in and experience a house where your child would have grown up had they been born in that era is just amazing. And it's also not bad to point out how much better living conditions they have now as opposed to how they would have lived back then. And don't complain to me about, this XYZ, because look what it could have been. But anyway, I think those were the things that struck me first off, was just the period clothing. And these folks who actually work at these living history museums are specially trained to stay in character. And so it's fun to try to get them to talk about something that is more recent in history, and they will look at you and shake their head like, I'm sorry, ma'am, I don't have a clue what you're talking about. And so my kids had a great time trying to trip up these period actors.
I mean, you're really walking through what was Williamsburg in the early 1700s or mid 1700s, correct? Like, it has the churches, it has the schools, it has the shops, the blacksmith, I'm trying to think of what else, anything that would have been in town at that time, correct?
Gardens, and you can see how they used to grow all their own food. You get to see brick making. That's just fascinating. There were wig makers, and there was a shop where they worked with tin. So, a tailor shop, just a lot of different businesses and shops that you can experience from that time period.
Yeah, it's great. Let's talk a little bit about what is in. I'm going to try to get a good shadow. So this is what the table of contents look like. Like I said, it is a free download, so you can go to sonlight.com/Williamsburg. But everything is in here and they're great pictures that that were taken to put this guide together. You know, this particular guide really does talk a little bit more about the historical triangle, which also includes Jamestown, Williamsburg, and Yorktown. So it does give you, it does give you like advice on how to visit all three of these in one trip. And I think it says like you could take like 3 days or 5 days, depending on what.
You can't do it in one.
Yeah.
You can't do it in one day. Don't even try.
And in fact, I think in the appendix in the back, there are like, there's like a sample itinerary. I think they suggest 4 days. So, you know, what you could do on all 4 days. But it does talk about Jamestown and Yorktown as well. It talks about, you know, how you can get tickets and what each visit to each site might look like, how long you need at each location. It does have little tidbits of trying to like talk to people at each museum and how to sort of navigate getting the most out of each visit. The other thing that I'm trying to get to the page here is the practical tips.
Yes. So, just things that no matter what field trip you're taking are important to keep in mind. I mean, just simple things like most schools, public schools, private schools, if they're going to take a field trip, they'll do it on Thursday or Friday. So don't go on Thursday and Friday. Go on Monday or Tuesday. And hotel rooms are cheaper Sunday through Thursday than they are on the weekend because everybody's going on the weekend. So we found that when we were raising our kids that we would very often take field trips in the middle of the week and nobody was there.
Yeah.
The other really important thing to remember is a lot of these living history museums recognize that homeschool groups love to come. And certainly because for them, groups who are going to come the middle of the week are fantastic because they are filling up the time that they don't normally have a lot of people coming into their facility. So they will very often have special homeschool days or special admission rates for homeschoolers. And so call them ahead of time. Doesn't take very long to pick up your phone and give them a call, and you probably could get a break on, yes. And what to reasonably expect from your children. You know, if you don't read anything else in this tip section, read that. Because don't expect your kids to be interested in stopping at every sign and reading and digesting the whole thing. Even high schoolers, it really doesn't work that way unless they're just passionate about history. So be willing to stop. Yeah, be willing to stop and kind of skim it over and put it in a nutshell in 1 or 2 sentences and move on.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much to take in. There's so much to go over. For example, if you are visiting Williamsburg in July, it will be hot.
Yeah, don't go in the middle of the summer.
Yeah, you'll be hot. And your kids will not want to spend a whole lot of time, you know, outside watching Martha Washington talk about whatever it is she's talking about that day. It's just not, you know, they're going to be like, where is the air conditioning? I am hot and tired. So definitely make sure that you're setting up your expectations appropriately, age appropriateness and maybe
climate.
Climate.
And think about how lucky you are that you're homeschooling, because you can go to Williamsburg in September without missing any school.
Yeah.
So, and that's a much better time of year to go.
Yeah, for sure. We talked a little bit about the importance of living history museums and in the study of history. But it really does help history come to life, right?
It does. Absolutely. One other place that we went and created guide for was Monticello.
Oh, yeah.
And we're in the process of working on Mount Vernon. And so take advantage of those. I mean, it's wonderful to be able to look at someone else's footwork ahead of you, someone else's who's gone through and picked up on all those little tidbits and pro tips and suggestions for where to eat and where to stay. Yeah, very, very important. And so look for those.
Judy, this is completely off the cuff. Do you remember that restaurant that we had you stay when you went to, or that you
Yes.
visited?
Yes.
In Monticello. What was the name of that?
I'm trying to.
I don't remember either. But in that guide, it's at sonlight.com/Monticello. There is a restaurant, and it is period like restaurant, right? It has.
It's
like
it
going.
Was so we. Yes, it was, and they you actually are eating in the location that was originally the pub, and much like during that time, you don't go in and get a menu with 27 entrees and 13 desserts. They have one or two main dishes that they cook for the day, and that's what you get to eat. And you might have a choice between one or two vegetables or yeast rolls and cornbread, but it's just like eating in the time period, and you're eating at wooden tables, and it's just it's amazing. And you can actually go through other parts of the tavern. And by the way, it's called Mickey Tavern.
Yes.
Yep. It's spelled Michie, but it's pronounced Mickey. And you can actually see what the rest of the tavern, not just the dining area, would have looked like. So games that they would have played, and just the decoration with the oil lamps, and it's just fascinating, and so makes it come alive to be able to experience it firsthand.
Yeah, absolutely interesting. So there's a ton of living history museums, especially around where you live. What other ones? We mentioned, the top 3, Williamsburg, Monticello, Mount Vernon, or, big 3. What other ones are up there that might help expand the study of history?
So if you're familiar with upstate New York at all, about 20 minutes west of Rochester, there is a living history museum called Genesee Country Village and Museum. And again, it's on the very same theme. It would remind you of Williamsburg, but on a much smaller scale. And because it's smaller, it's much less expensive. The last I knew, they also did special rates for homeschoolers, but you would want to double check on that. But one of the things that they're known for is they do a weekend event that focuses on Little House on the Prairie. And so they kind of recreate some of that show and that story. So that's kind of fun. Old Sturbridge Village in Sturbridge, Massachusetts. That's a phenomenal one, and right on the water. And so that is so much fun. And again, not super expensive. Mystic Seaport in Connecticut. Just a lot of different places to go. Plymouth Plantation in Massachusetts is awesome. You can actually see a full-size replica of the Mayflower there. And go in and walk through and see what it would have been like for those people to have to cross the ocean in that boat. You really can't imagine that until you physically stand inside that boat. That was a pretty eye-opening moment for our family.
I grew up in Ohio, and we would go to Greenfield Village in Detroit. So very similar. It's by the Henry Ford Museum, but it's very similar. I think that, honestly, no matter where you are, there's probably one of these living history museums within driving distance. And if you're traveling abroad, you could probably do a Google search and find a living history museum near where you're going to try to wrap in some of the world history that comes along with Sonlight as well.
Yes, for sure.
Well, this is fun. I hope that you guys can, fit in living history museums into your study of American history and world history. There are a lot of options out there, and it does really help the books that you're reading, the conversations you're having with your children come to life when they see them in real life.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us. Bye.